Whether you're passing through or you plan on staying for a while, we welcome you to Discover Jamestown. Hey everybody, my name is Warren and we're here with Discover Jamestown. I'm out here at Pelican Point on the Jamestown Reservoir with my sister Tamela, and we had a beautiful night here and a beautiful morning. We're ready to start seeing some of those historical sites in Jamestown. We're starting at Fort Seward, so let's hit the road. Well, we've made it to Fort Seward, didn't get lost, so that's great. But before we jump out and learn about Fort Seward and the history that this wonderful piece of land has to offer, we're going to talk to Steve Reidburn and Dale Marks, two individuals who really know a lot about Jamestown and its history. So we're going to invite them in and see what they have to say.
Hello, Steve and Dale.
Hi, good morning.
Come on in.
Thank you.
Well, we've invited Steve Reidburn, historic 1883 Stutsman County Courthouse site supervisor, and Dale Marks, who has had a lot to do here at Fort Seward. And Steve, we'll start with you. We're really interested in some of the sites that we're going to see here in Jamestown today. And since you're kind of the father of the historic courthouse, tell us kind of like what the courthouse offers and what people would see if they stop by.
Well, you just stop by the courthouse. You need to remember that in 1888, there was a constitutional convention held in our courtroom, and there was people from all over Dakota Territory that were there. And they decided to organize the Constitution for North Dakota. So we considered that courthouse and that courtroom the birthplace of North Dakota.
So before North Dakota was North Dakota, we had the courthouse.
Yes.
If we had to go to the courthouse today, Steve, what would we see inside?
You'd see lots of pressed tin. It's floor to ceiling, wall. Every wall is covered. The ceiling is covered. It's the largest collection of pressed tin in North Dakota, possibly the upper Midwest.
So Steve, if I walk up a few blocks from that, I saw on a map the historic Stutsman County Museum. What am I going to find when I step in through those doors?
Well, you walk in the door and you start going upstairs, you see all these beautiful stained glass windows, and they're all Tiffany windows. And they have just about everything you could imagine in that building. If you want to know anything about Stutsman County, it's there somewhere.
So it wasn't originally a museum. From what I'm hearing, it was like a house for somebody at one time, right?
It's Lutz Mansion, and it was by a mega rich guy from the early 20th century. He was a lumberman, and he had lots of money, and he had lumber yards all over Stutsman County, and he built this big mansion. It has a ballroom on the third floor.
So some of the lumber we see in there is probably something he produced.
Yeah, he had shipped in. Built that house himself while he lived in another house next door. There is a place too that you might want to stop, and that would be the National Buffalo Museum up by the village. They have lots of stuff up there, but you know more than that about that than I do.
Yeah, I read a little bit about it, Steve, and I know that they kind of chronicle the history of the buffalo from the brink of extinction to the repopulation today, and I heard there's kind of a lot of history in there as well, but I think there's something else in there too, Tamela, that you came up with.
Yes, Dale, I was heard that there was an albino buffalo around Jamestown for the past 20 years. What happened to that?
She finally passed away of old age, and then they decided to get her mounted and have her in the museum, which I think that's really a good way of preserving her memory, to have her in there. So it is a good exhibit.
And some of the Native American history is in there as well.
Yes, there's lots and lots of arrowheads and hammers and things like that the Native Americans used in their everyday life. Arrows and bows and clothing, and it's just an amazing collection.
All right, well, Steve and Dale, thank you so much for that history lesson. We've been in this camper long enough. I spent the night in here. We're here at Fort Seward, so let's get out and see what this place has to offer.
Let's get after it.
Well, Dale and Steve, we've walked across the field and we come across a pile of rocks. I don't see a fort anywhere near us right now. Is this what's left of Fort Seward?
This marks the boundary, the north side of where the officers' quarters actually were. And then this fort ran just a little bit southeast, and if you can look across to that mound that's over there, that's where the barracks was situated. In the 50s, they mined out gravel over there and they put the road through. They didn't have quite the mind for preservation of history as we do nowadays. But so Fort Seward was cut in half there, but this place still is a very historical place. But this is where the officers' quarters were at that, and from 1872 to 77. That's when Fort Seward was in existence, and it was put in existence to guard the rail workers as the rails were put across Stutsman County, Kidder County, and on to Fort Lincoln.
What was the type of weapons you used here?
The type of weapons that were used were, well, earlier it had to be some Civil War muskets here, leftover muskets from that era. And then in 1873, the trapdoor Springfield 45-70 caliber Springfield was invented, and they were issuing that to different companies across the Indian War era. We know that the 45-70 was the main firearm of this area. In fact, there was a motor grader operator just northwest of here that was grading along, and he saw this bar laying in the gravel, and he got down and looked, and here it was an old 45-70, just the metal parts of it, and that is in the museum up here at the Interpretive Center. So we know that they had 45-70s.
Was there a lot of skirmishes here? Did they use those weapons often?
No, they probably used them for target practice. The only action they saw was when the railroad went on strike. The soldiers were sent down to the railroad bed to guard the railroad equipment. That was the only thing that they actually did carry their weapons for, other than practice, guard duty, that kind of thing.
So we have the sites here. We have a beautiful monument back here of some of the soldiers who were from this area and served in other wars. The state's largest flag here at the fort. It's really a beautiful site.
It has been one of my favorite places ever since I moved to Jamestown.
Well, Dale and Steve, thank you so much for this history lesson. We're excited to see more what Fort Seward has to offer. And on the way in, I saw a cannon. That thing doesn't work, does it?
It works very well. In fact, you're going to get a real bang out of shooting it. Are you ready to have some fun with the cannon?
I'm exploding with anticipation, Dale.
Okay, here we go.
Ready? Aim! Fire!
Woo! How about that, Tamela? What a day we've had, and you can too. We've got to see all those historical sites, the explosions. We thank Steve and Dale for their expertise and their historical knowledge. And if you want to take the same tour we did, go to discoverjamestownnd.com and discover what Jamestown has to offer as far as history goes.